All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to the second last dungeon for now in our dungeon speedrun breakdown series. Today we're going to be talking about Vesper's Host by Savage Bolt, Carnage, and Kel in 8 minutes and 20 seconds. So Vesper's Host, to give you a little intro, has been kind of plagued by a lot of Bungie changes in speedrunning. They patched a lot of the holes people were using to get to the first encounter. They patched the kind of dupe you could do with the cores in first encounter. So a lot of stuff has changed in this dungeon. And formerly there was a time, I believe it was a higher 8-minute time in this category that used a couple strategies that have now been patched. And so Savage Bolt and his team here had to do a bit of theory crafting and strat crafting in order to be able to achieve this time, which is a pretty impressive accomplishment. I know this team is running it back in the future, potentially next season, for a lower 8 or maybe even a high 7. So keep an eye out for that. There's a couple changes we're going to discuss, a couple theoretical strategies that this team is testing, or maybe some different routing that we're going to talk about when I show you these POVs. But for now, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started by looking at Savage's POV. Okay, so before we actually start watching the POV, let's talk about class composition like I normally do. So for the class composition today, we actually have 1 Titan and 2 Hunters. Okay. And so the Titan is there for 2 things, right? Number 1, it's going to be for glacial quake damage on Raneiks, so the servitor boss. Obviously, multiple, little meatballs, all of them getting hit by the crystals. Glacial quake does very good damage on them. Now, however, this role could be swapped out for a Hunter in the future for a Star Eater, Silence, and Squall or something like that, because they already have a tether. So, a Squall was doing similar numbers to Glacial Quake from what I've been told. So, you can go either way here, and a Hunter could potentially be useful for some more movement related stuff later on in the dungeon. And then later on at the final boss, the Titan swaps to Storm's Keep, and obviously Curious T-Crash is pretty helpful on the final boss as well, does a nice big chunk of damage. Okay, so Titan is basically just here for damage. Okay, and then the 2 Hunters, right? Hunters, I mean, if you've been watching the Dungeon Speedrun Breakdown series recently, you know that it's basically for movement because you don't get a flag at the start of the dungeon. And so being able to shatter skate and do some cool sword movement to get to the first/second encounter quickly is pretty important. And so Hunter has that capability. Now, the question here is, these 2 Hunters, they swap to Warlock at some point after Raneiks dies, right? So after Raneiks dies and Puppeteer starts, both of these guys end up swapping to Warlock. And now you might be wondering, why do you have 2 wells, right? Why not have like 1 Warlock and 2 Titan? And the reason for this is actually because with 2 bolt charge barricades, the team told me that the boss was actually flinching too much. And so they used Queenbreaker, not to spoil anything, for the final boss. And so having the boss flinch a little bit too much like that was proving to be quite annoying. And so they opted to just run 2 Warlocks and 1 Titan instead, just to keep the quality of life. And obviously, mechanics wise, Warlock with healing grenade and, healing abilities and a couple other things which we'll discuss in the future, it's a lot easier quality of life for some of the Puppeteer mechanics compared to if you were to run 2 Titan, 1 Warlock. Okay. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and sit back, relax, enjoy the show. We're going to be talking about Savage Bolt's POV first. He is one of our Hunters. Now, at the start of this dungeon, the 2 Hunters, one of them is going to make their way to the second encounter, and one of them is going to kind of hit some checkpoints in between the first and second encounter. Now, both of these Hunters are going to take a similar entrance route here. They're going to oob through this little hole here. It takes a couple tries because this is a pretty precise hole here. Fortunately, misses the ground line here. So yeah, normally you would, chain a couple ground lines under this kind of tight area here. And there's a couple other things that are changed now about this route. You can do an ergo transfer here, an ergo transfer here, and you can do like a double sword here. So you could like swipe up and then swipe to the right here. So he's going to turn to the right. And then on top of this, I believe he mountaintops here because he does like a skate. So he's going to ground line here, and he's going to mountaintop the wall in front of him so he can drop down directly to stop his movement, which is kind of interesting because a lot of the time you use mountaintop to boost yourself, but not a lot of the time in speedrunning do you see mountaintop being used as a braking function. So that's pretty cool. So yeah. And on top of that, getting up to that wall, I believe they use a Glacier Grenade boost. This is a speedrun tech that we don't really talk about anymore because it's not used very often. But if you guys go back and look at some older Last Wish speedruns, before Mountaintop was introduced, getting a vertical boost in height on Hunter was kind of annoying. And so before Mountaintop was changed to give you that much kind of speed when you blast yourself with it, people would throw a glacier grenade under their feet at a wall they were going up, and it would boost them upwards by introducing this new artificial ground and also restore your jumps as well. So that's pretty helpful if you don't want to use mountaintop. And the reason why they don't use mountaintop for this particular area when they're kind of, this particular area here when you're kind of going up, instead of using mountaintop, because mountaintop damages you, and because you need to use mountaintop again shortly after this, you don't want to die to your own mountaintop, right? So to avoid damaging yourself, you just use a glacier boost now here. Okay, so just some small routing changes that I want to talk about here. His teammate Carnage is basically right behind him. Oh yeah, sorry, this is the actual section here. So you don't mount a top here, you'd use a glacier grenade here instead. Okay, so here he's going to go ahead and swap to prismatic. There are, I believe, there's a death berry right over here, that which the timing is pretty precise, but you have to blink through it. And so he is going to just blink through it. He has a timing little memorized here. He's going to swap back to stasis, and he's going to continue progressing his way through the oob. Okay, so now he's going to land, and shortly he is going to make his way actually back inbounds through a hole here. So you guys might recognize this area. You see all these little like trip mines going off, and he's going to make his way to the first encounter. Okay, so the reason for that is because there's a checkpoint over here. You can see the objective updates. There's a checkpoint over here that needs to be hit in order to progress the rest of the dungeon. And so Savage Bolt, he's going to go ahead and hit that checkpoint. And something interesting going on here is something called asset load delay, right? So this is another speedrun tech that people use in order to delay, assets from loading in. So Destiny's base maps, like when you're in a load zone, they often have a lot of these assets loaded in, whether it's like these pillars or these, server stacks or like these stairs, it's, for example, right? Most of the environment's loaded in, but some dynamic assets, for example, doors that, spawn and despawn, they aren't loaded in if there's some sort of asset load delay going on. Right now, what you can do is if someone's joining your fire team, you've probably seen this before, like if someone joins you at the start of a garden, for example, like the Minotaur doesn't spawn in and like nothing spawned in, the door is not spawned in. We talked about this during garden, for example, when a certain checkpoint's not hit. So in this dungeon in particular, they actually have their Titan player, the third player, they're sitting in orbit and they join at a certain time. And because they're joining at a certain time, the game just refuses to load in these assets until the player's loaded in. And so this door is just not there. So this door is not there. Normally there's like a blue door there when you get to first. And so that allows Savage and Carnage, both Idge names, I just realized. So Savage and Carnage, they're going to make their way to the transition between the first and second encounter. Now, if you're familiar with this dungeon at all, you're probably aware that you can in fact dunk cores in the transition puzzle from first and second encounter, between first and second encounter. You can dunk cores and they count towards the progress for the first encounter's core dunks, right? For whatever reason, there's like a global counter of core dunks, and if you dunk in the 1-2 transition, it like counts for the first encounter for whatever reason, right? So what these guys are doing now is they've basically broken their way into this transition, and then they're going to go ahead and just like start manipulating their way through this transition so that they can dunk 3 cores here. So you see there, Kel's joined the fire team. Kel's join buffering was causing that door not to be loaded in, but now you see these doors are loaded in because Kel has actually successfully fully merged with the fire team. Okay, so you'll see here, Savage is just opening a couple doors here. He's going to let Carnage in. He's going to close the door behind him. Carnage is going to take care of the first captain, and Savage is going to get ready to take care of the second captain. Okay, so right over here, he's closing the door again, reopening the door, making sure the power reserves are constantly, in the right place. So something interesting about Savage here is that something he told me about is that because you're gated to puzzle, we've talked about the concept of gating in speedruns before, the limiting factor is puzzle in this case. Doors take a little while to open, right? They have a little bit of an animation, and they also have a bit of an interact that you have to wait through. So what Savage actually does here is while he's waiting for this captain to spawn in, he actually swords to the door over here, which it's over on the left, right? Sorry, you can't really see it right now, but that door that he just flicked at right now, he swords over, he opens the door ahead of time while he's waiting for this captain to spawn in, he kills the captain, he dunks the core. And also an interesting fact about this dungeon that they told me about is that because Savage has kind of leapfrogged in front of Carnage, normally when you kill a captain in this kind of maze area, it spawns in a new captain in the area where you just like dunked, right? However, because Savage has leapfrogged and he's already in the second room, there's some tech here where when Carnage kills his captain and dunks the core, it thinks that the furthest forward player is Savage, and it spawns in the captain next to Savage instead. And so you'll see in just a second here, like during this downtime, he could have opened that door, which is what they do now. And so boom, he kills the captain, dunks the core, bit of a delay there. And then now he's going to kill the captain one more time. And then this door would already be open for him. Obviously here, you have to like wait a little bit for that door to open. It takes a while, you know, a couple seconds of time lost there. And then he's going to go ahead and dunk the final core. And then he's going to head out of bounds. Okay, so around this time, he is calling for his teammate Kel to start first encounter, because you need to start first encounter at a certain time for these core dunks to count for that encounter in a timely manner. So he's going to go ahead and call for Kel to do that. First encounter completes. As you can see, he's getting rewards for that encounter right about now, and he jumps through this conveniently placed hole in the maze here. Now, if you think this looks convenient, this dungeon used to be a lot more convenient to oob and navigate around and hit checkpoints and stuff. But, you know, they've had to reroute and change a bunch of things because Bungie has been, you know, patching this dungeon a lot. Probably the most reworked / you know, patched dungeon in terms of like speedrun stuff when it comes to oobing and stuff like that. But this team has obviously found some nice workarounds, which I would say have resulted in a pretty fluid amount of strategy in this speedrun. Okay, so now what Savage is actually doing here is he is making his way through the oob. He's hitting a bunch of blinks here, right? Just waiting a little bit. And there's actually, I believe he said there were 3 death barriers that he's blinking around here. So the reason he's on blink and he doesn't just swap back to stasis here is there's actually 3 death barriers that he just avoided by doing those blinks. So pretty tight precision here when it comes to movement. And then there's also one more checkpoint around this area where he's sorting forward here that needs to be hit on his way to second encounter, right? So there's actually 3 checkpoints between first and second encounter. The first checkpoint is actually hit by the Titan, and it's not a retroactive checkpoint, and so it needs to be hit after first encounter is already over. And so once the Titan stops first encounter, right, so they start first encounter ends, they're going to go through that blue door that despawns that was, you know, gone for Carnage and Savage because of that asset load delay, and then they're going to start heading into that orange room where there was some dialogue playing and there's like a bunch of ads, you know, at the start of the 1-2 transition. That's the first checkpoint. The second checkpoint has just been hit by Savage, right? The corruption is spreading. He just hit that checkpoint. And then the third checkpoint is going to be hit by Carnage, right? And the Carnage checkpoint, it's the one basically right in front of the flag near second encounter, okay? So Savage is doing something a little interesting here. He's dying in a very particular manner. So what you could do normally, if you were just trying to spawn inbounds in a load zone after being out of bounds and there's no convenient hole for you to go into, is you see how he's about to hit this Vesper station load? Well, he could just die like to the load zone here, like he could just like exterior himself on this wall here, but for some reason what that will do is it will put him into the room directly above him instead of death warping him to where Carnage is for second encounter. And so in order to avoid time loss, what he does is he drops down and he dies to a death barrier, like a kill barrier that's beneath him, right? And so for whatever reason, if you die to a kill barrier that's beneath you here, there's like a cylinder going downward. Savage told me that actually warps his ghost to where Carnage is, right? So if he's a little slow here, it doesn't do that and he gets joining allies, which makes it so that he can't do a skip later on to the third encounter. So this is a little bit tight. If he's slow, then it's a problem. But as long as he's here on time to hit this checkpoint and Carnage is kind of sitting on top of the next checkpoint, he's going to go ahead and die by shadow diving here. You can't see it because he goes into his inventory. But yeah, that warps his ghost here. Carnage revives him, or he gets revived here. And then he's going to go ahead and place the flag, right? So you might be wondering, I mean, Carnage is already there. Why doesn't Carnage place the flag? Okay, we're going to talk about that in just a second. But yeah, this is pretty much it for Savage Bull's POV. I would say Vesper is a very front-loaded dungeon, like really a lot of crazy like movement stuff and checkpoint stuff and, you know, cool tech stuff, routing stuff in like the first half of the dungeon. And then it's just kind of like 2 boss encounters. It's just kind of like 2 boss encounters. There's like some unique stuff in the bosses, which we'll definitely get to, but then it's just kind of like doing the mechanics fast. Okay, so that's pretty much it for Savage Bull's POV for now. We're going to go ahead and move on to Carnage's POV real quick. Okay, so Carnage actually does his entrance on Arc Hunter. Okay, and so the reason for Carnage doing his entrance on Arc Hunter, it's just a personal preference thing. Savage told me that Stasis Hunter is like a little bit faster, but at the end of the day, when you're doing like a duo entrance like this, it's fine to have your entrance players like a little staggered anyway. So you'll see here, Carnage actually, when he's going up this like large vertical section in just a second, where Savage would do a glacier boost, he does a mountaintop ascension instead, which is a speedrun tech where basically you mount on top of the ground at the apex of your jump and then instantly ascension. It gives you a huge boost of vertical speed. And so you see he's kind of caught up to Savage here. And so you'll see here that also Savage and Carnage are taking like alternating routes, and it's because it would obviously be slower if both of them were to just wait for the other person to go. And so Savage is going to take one route, Carnage is going to, you know, kind of cross paths with him and go on the other route. And that way they can kind of both do this blink operation at the same time without losing too much time, right? So yeah, Carnage, he is actually going to completely avoid the checkpoint that Savage is going to hit, the corruption spreads checkpoint that I was talking about earlier. And so this is going to do something a little bit interesting to Carnage, which you don't really see in any other speedrun. And we're going to talk about that when we get there. So obviously Kel's still loading in right now, right? Kel's left the fire team, you know, Kel's rejoined and stuff like that. And so that's going to delay the assets. That's going to allow Carnage to pass through the same door that Savage passed through. But you'll see here what Carnage does is obviously he is going to head over to his first captain. And obviously, you know, Savage was responsible for taking care of, you know, captains 2 and 3. So Carnage is going to take care of captain 1. This slowness here, by the way, is why Savage was waiting around so long for that second captain to spawn. Just a bit unfortunate, you know, when you're moving this fast and you're killing the ads this quickly, that there's a bit of, you know, desync and lag when it comes to the captains and their core pickups, right? So it can be kind of annoying. So yeah, here Carnage is just going to dunk. And then this little bank launch there, which a little fun fact for you guys. So Bungie actually patched this, but you used to be able to jump like at the end of a core dunk interact or just a dunk interact in general. Like you could do this in Gauss as well, and it would send you flying upward. I don't know, Bungie just patched that for some reason, but it was like a cool thing you could do in like DSC and Gauss. And you know, he kind of he mimicked the movement here, but obviously he didn't get sent nearly as high as you would from like an old bank launch. So he's the same oob that Carnage does, or Savage does, I should say. This is Carnage's POV. And instead of he's going to obviously blink here to avoid the death barrier, but instead of hitting the checkpoint that Savage does, which is like off to, I believe, the left over there, he's actually going to head straight to second encounter. Okay, so he hits caster complex load. First encounter has just completed, and now Carnage is on his way to second encounter here. Right. Sliding down the tube. It's going to go over here. It's going to hit a little ground line. And boom. So right over here is the checkpoint for second encounter. He's going to swap loadouts, but you'll notice something interesting. When he hit the caster complex load zone, normally when you hit another load zone from a different encounter, your buffs get removed, right? Your buffs get removed, especially like if you die, right? However, sometimes if you don't hit the checkpoints between certain encounters, the game forgets to erase buffs or certain like modifiers on your screen, on your character, right? So this is something called power reserves desync, and it's a tech that's basically exclusive to this dungeon. I have not really seen a desync like this used in any other activity. So the way this works is the power reserve status effect on Carnage makes his character interact very differently with his environment. The reason why he's able to keep power reserves despite the fact that he's in second encounter right now is because the checkpoint that it removes power reserves from your character is the one that Savage will hit near that corruption spreads voice line, right? And so because Carnage was not in the first encounter load zone when that checkpoint went off, the game forgot to erase power reserves from Carnage. And so the game thinks, you know, Carnage is in like this weird desynced state because he has a first encounter buff, but he's in the second encounter load zone. And so that's going to stop him from basically interacting with any of the Raneiks mechanics. And it's also going to stop him from being able to revive. You'll also see here that he has Kvastalon, exotic Kvastalon, which is quite strange because speedrunners generally don't like exotic primaries outside of Trinity because they, again, like I've said this before, but they lack lethality, right? And Kvastov is no exception. But for whatever reason, when you're in this power reserve desync state, almost all exotic effects don't work properly, and a lot of perks are broken as well. So stuff like Incandescent and like Volt Shot don't work properly, right? Only regular single target damage increases work. And so Carnage has a surrounded indebted kindness on instead of like a Volt Shot one because Volt Shot literally doesn't work. And apparently exotic Kvastov's like exotic effect, the bouncing bullet, is like one of the only exotic effects that actually works for ad clear in this encounter when you're in this desync state. So a pretty interesting solution to a pretty unique problem. So Carnage here, he's going to just walk around and wait for this checkpoint to update. He obviously has just rezzed Savage. Savage is going to go ahead and place the flag because Carnage literally can't. And then the encounter is going to be started by the two of them while the Titan gets joining allies. Okay, so Carnage, he's just going to chill here. I'm not going to bore you with the ad clear too much. Something interesting about this ad clear, by the way, is that before there was a Brazilian team that was running this dungeon at the time. And you guys may be aware of this because for the first couple like weeks of Vesper, it was longer than a couple weeks, but there was a period in Vesper's host history where the Raneiks encounter, the marauders that spawned that were required to kill to spawn in this machine priest, I think you need like 5 or 6 marauder kills to spawn in the machine priest, and sometimes you would only get a wave of 4, and then the game would take forever to spawn another wave of marauders. And so unfortunately a lot of the runs at the time died at this encounter because of that RNG of just marauders taking forever to spawn. These days, Bungie apparently patched something in this dungeon that consistently spawns the marauders faster, and so there's not as much RNG in this encounter spawning the first machine priest, which is obviously, you know, a very nice thing to have for a speedrunner to have increased consistency, right? So they're just going to go ahead and they're going to kill the machine priest. You know, Carnage over here, he's just going to use his Kvostov to try and help kill the ads to spawn in the, you know, suppressor servitor here. Kel has to do the mechanics by himself pretty much because Carnage can't really help at all. He's going to go ahead and he's going to read the numbers out for Kel. Kel is going to continue ad clearing over here. You'll notice Savage has died, which is something that's a little bit interesting. So I'm actually going to move over to Kel's POV to explain a little bit of what's going on in this second encounter. And, you know, Kel seems to have some sort of brain rot montage tiled on his screen here. So we'll skip over that section for now. So what does Kel do? Kel, at the beginning of the dungeon, he leaves at a certain point to help with the asset load delay. He rejoins, and when he rejoins, you'll notice here, he gets a flag because he doesn't get a flag at Raneiks, so he needs his Glacial for Raneiks, pretty nice. He has Galley on for the ad clear at Raneiks as well, and he's going to sit here, and he's going to wait for a call from his teammates. And while his teammates, I believe, around the time that they're dunking the 3rd core, they're going to ask him to start the encounter. The encounter is going to start. Infiltration, it's going to instantly end, and then the door is going to open, right? And so Kel, where is he going? He is heading through this area. He needs to keep his heavy ammo, so he can't really be on a sword. We're just going to skip past this area here, and the checkpoint that he needs to hit is in this orange room. So you see, as soon as he's in this orange room, you see a voice line plays. That is the first of the 3 checkpoints that needs to be hit in order to pull to the second encounter. Right now, Savage is hitting the 2nd checkpoint. And finally, Carnage is going to hit the 3rd checkpoint. They're going to start the encounter, and Kel's going to get joining allies. Okay, so what does Kel do in this encounter? Well, I mean, it's just solo mechanics. They're not doing anything crazy special with these mechanics here. You know, because one person is going to leave on skip, and because the other person is desynced, Kel has to carry the bulk of the ad clear on his shoulders here. He has a surrounded until its return on, and he's keeping that galley fully loaded, so that when he moves into this area, he can blow up all of these shanks as quickly as possible. He's going to shiver strike his way to the top area so that he can immediately kill this suppressor shank. Again, a lot of these interacts are delayed when you're moving this fast, so kind of annoying, similar to the cores in the 1-2 puzzle. And you'll see here, Kel is kind of, again, just doing some ad clear, just hanging out, spawning the new machine priest. He's going to kill him with the surrounded until its return again. Now, if you're curious, you know, this is going to be mostly the same stuff again, so I'll talk a little bit while we're watching this. But a lot of the ribs in this dungeon actually come from this encounter in particular, because doing it as a duo, especially with one person desynced, the encounter can have a lot of variance in terms of ad clear and mechanics, and so it can be kind of a challenge. And a lot of the time, you know, the runs that get past the first area of the dungeon, so like the movement section of the dungeon, they lose them to this section in particular, because this section can be a bit of a challenge. So, yep, Kel's just going to go ahead. He's going to shoot all of his buttons. He's going to dunk Operator. And he's going to kill the Suppressor Shank. And they're going to go ahead and start damage. Okay, so damage, how it's done here is a renewal dusk field is thrown on top of the Titan, on top of Kel here, by the desynced player, and that's because the Titan needs limit break for his frost armor, for his for his glacial quake damage. He's on starter glacial quake. There is a tether on the ground here connecting all of the different Raneiks, and as you can see here, pretty fast bake, pretty chill, nothing too complicated, and Kel is going to get pulled to the final encounter. He's going to get white pulled, and his 2 teammates are actually both going to leave. Okay, so that's it for Raneiks damage. Pretty straightforward stuff there. We're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to our final POV that we're going to look at today, which is Savage for the rest of the run. Okay, so what is Savage doing during this Raneiks encounter? How is he actually getting to the 3rd encounter? So this is some pretty interesting stuff here. So he's going to go ahead and he's going to help a little bit with the ad clear on Raneiks, and he's just going to jump off the map, right? And the reason why he jumps off the map is, for whatever reason, I'm sure you guys know this, but in Destiny, you can set your spawn on some solid ground, right? And so if you die and the game wants to res you or you want to revive yourself, you'll respawn where that spawn is, right? And for whatever reason, when you go up top, you get TP'd up top with the whole Servitor's Fall thing, and you get TP'd to this explosive shank area, it wipes the game's memory of any of the spawns that you set when you were downstairs. And so what Savage is doing here is he's obviously helping a little bit with the ad clear, but he's also jumping off the map because he knows now that he no longer has a spawn set in the encounter. And for whatever reason, you'll see here in just a second, despite the fact that his ghost is in the encounter, right? His spawn actually isn't set there. And so when he decides to revive, and he goes through his full timer, because if it's one of his teammates manually res him, he would spawn in the encounter, right? Because the manual res is different from resing yourself. So for some reason, when he does end up respawning, which we'll see here in 3, 2, 1, he spawns at the final boss. Yeah. I don't understand this one either. I'm not gonna lie. Players have literally tried using default spawn manipulation after Raneiks is over to try and get to the final boss. And for whatever reason, there's like 3 extra spawn points between Raneiks and the final boss after the encounter is over. But for whatever reason, during the encounter, if you die and you res yourself, all of the spawns between Raneiks and Corrupted Puppeteer completely ignored, and you spawn at the final boss. Yeah. Bit of a head scratcher there. The only change that this team has implemented up until this point, so at Raneiks, is that because Raneiks can be a little bit faster and because they're going to be gated to the revive if Raneiks is any faster, what Savage Bull's role actually does here is you see the Machine Priest, he actually just galleys himself on top of the Machine Priest because you can't actually die like while you're getting TP. The game gives you a lot of health, and so he needs to die as early as possible, and then him getting sent up there, his team getting sent up there still wipes his revive like down here and like ignores the fact that his spawn was set down here. And so yeah, he just dies like on top of the Machine Priest, which gives him that 45-second timer. It starts ticking a little bit earlier. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to move on to the end of Raneiks here. He's going to spawn in this turn back here. He's going to make it back down over here. And the reason why he doesn't hit the load zone, so there's a load zone boundary right here between the second and third encounter. And if you go into the load zone right now, the game thinks that you're in the encounter, but you're in the top area. So it's like, oh, it gives you Servitor's Fall and tries to return you back to the encounter. So Savage, he's just like waiting out of the load zone until the encounter is actually over, because if you were to enter early, the game would just pull him back to Raneiks. So what he's going to do here is he's just going to wait at the boundary of the load zone when the boss is about to die. Okay, so they're doing damage. Obviously, the Raneiks here is not very fast. He told me that the Raneiks was quite slow, and so normally he wouldn't be waiting around this long, and he'd be here even earlier actually, and with new strats, right? So yeah, Raneiks is dead. As soon as he dies, Servitor's Fall is no longer an issue, so he's going to walk into the load zone here. There's a checkpoint in this pipe that he needs to hit, which is why he walks backward. At the very end of that load zone, there's a checkpoint, so that's why he backtracks a little bit. He's going to jump up here. And him being up top here, he doesn't need to really be up here very quickly. This checkpoint takes very long to progress for some reason. So he has to just wait for a while here. And as soon as he knows the checkpoint has been updated, you see that additional checkpoint there that has just been updated. He dies. And because it's a respawn restricted zone and Corrupted Puppeteer encounter is now startable, it counts him as being there and it wipes the entire fire team, right? So this is going to wipe Kel, who's the only person left in the fire team at this point because Carnage has already left. Both Carnage and Savage are going to rejoin on Warlock, and we're going to get right back into the encounter. So Kel right now, he's rallying. He's, spawned in, he's rallying. He's just started the encounter. And, Vesper is one of those activities for whatever reason in Destiny where during the final encounter, you spawn in alive if you rejoin, right? So that's nice. Doesn't really matter if they spawn in dead anyway because, you don't have res tokens in dungeons. But yeah, let's see over here. They're rejoining. You'll see here he's on Starfire, he's on Queenbreaker, and he's on Redirection Unvoiced. So you'll see here he's going to spawn in alive in the, I guess, first floor, the top floor, not really top floor, but like the first B1 floor, I guess you can call it, where all the, the whole team is together. And he's just stacking Redirection on his slug here. And the reason why he actually has a Redirection slug on is because he told me that with Surges, it's the only weapon that consistently one-shots the clones. And they need to be able to one-shot the clones very quickly for the solo side. And you're saying, solo side? What are you talking about? You'll see here in just a second. So Savage, his job is to grab Operator. And the reason why he grabs Operator and not his teammates is because dunking Operator back in the terminal takes time. And this part of the encounter is actually gated to the other 2 of his teammates. And the reason why is because Carnage and Kel are actually going to go duo one of the rooms, and Savage is going to solo one of the rooms. And the duo side needs to complete before the solo side does, so they need to get out of here as quickly as possible, whereas he has some time to dunk Operator into the terminal. Okay, so he's going to go ahead and do the op buttons. He's being told what they are right now. He's going to go ahead and dunk in the terminal. And like I said, he has some time to chill here, so he's just going to farm a little bit of super energy off of these ads, just kill him a little bit, and he's going to move on to this next area. He's just kind of hanging out here, you know, just chilling. And he has some orb mods on and he has some super mods on his helmet to try and get as well. And you'll notice here that he is kind of just chilling. He's kind of just chilling. And, you know, most of the time speedrunners, when they're, you know, we saw him on entrance, right? He's kind of rushing a lot of the time. He's kind of just chilling. And the reason for that is because you can't do 2 rooms at the same time in this encounter. So if 2 of your teammates are doing 1 room, you actually can pick up op and you can shoot 3 of the 4 buttons. But if you shoot the 4th button, nothing happens. So he is going to, again, shoot 3 of the 4 buttons. 1, 2, 3. And now he's going to wait. He's going to wait. There's a 4th button, but he's going to wait. He's going to bait this clone because otherwise the clone's going to chase him and, you know, die. He's going to die if he is in a bad spot. So, yeah, he's waiting. But as soon as he sees the line, the corrupted puppeteer withdraws from the duo side being completed, he closes that final, or he finishes that final panel. And now his sector purge has started, right? So you might be asking, why do you need to one-shot the clones, right? Why do you need redirection unvoiced to one-shot the clones? And the reason is he doesn't scan. He doesn't scan, right? He guesses, right? He guesses, he's on Starfire. He throws a nade at 2 of the 4 clones and then uses redirection unvoiced to one-shot a 3rd clone. If it's the 4th clone, which is the one that he doesn't guess, he told me it's almost always a rib, right? It's almost always like a reset, right? So it's a little bit of RNG here, like a 75% chance that you get it right. So you'll see here, 1, 2, he swaps to T-steps while his fusions are exploding. 3, and you'll see here he didn't one-shot that clone, right? And it's because Savage unfortunately forgot to Phoenix dive near the top floor when he, you know, in order to pick up orbs to get surges for his shotgun. And so he's very lucky here that fortunately it was one of the first 2 clones that had his core. If it was the bottom left clone, which is the 3rd one that he guesses, if that one was the one that had the core, he would be screwed. Okay. Also, you might notice that clone only took half its health. They told me the clone health here is like really buggy, and like if you have surges, even though it doesn't look like it's gonna one-shot, it will one-shot the clone. Okay. So yeah, that's pretty much it for Savage. He's going to grab his core here, and you'll see here the sector purge countdown hits 0 when he enters the dunk area here. So, you know, cutting it pretty close, That's why this RNG kind of guessing strat is quite risky, quite dangerous. But yeah, Savage has successfully managed to make his way to the dunk, and he switched to support auto, and him and his teammates are going to make his way to the top floor to do some damage. So Savage is on his way out here. He just needs to make it to the elevator around the same time as his teammates. And while he's falling into this TP pad, he like shoots some of these dregs in order to get a little bit of support auto charge, because he knows he just wants to give his teammates, specifically, you know, Carnage, who is doing Queenbreaker damage right off the rip. That's a Withering Gaze scout, by the way. I think it's an Admetus D. He uses a Withering Gaze scout there to give Kel a weaken for his D-Crash. And I think he told me that the reason why he uses this scout in particular is because he tried it with like Rocket Sidearm, and for some reason it like wouldn't weaken consistently. So he just uses a hit scan weapon now. So that T-Crash, it's going to hit the boss right as he spawns in. He's going to give support auto to Carnage because Carnage has just triggered Limit Break. So you really want to squeeze out that additional 10% of damage while Carnage still has Limit Break, because Carnage is currently dealing probably like 110 Ks to the boss's head right now, which is, you know, a lot of damage. And so that's why he kind of has support auto just for this short burst at the start here. And now, yeah, he's hitting like 61 Ks, 68 Ks, you know, particles fully applied now. I believe one of them is on a Chill Clip Riptide to apply slow to the boss for Facet of Courage with well conversion. So yeah, here, as soon as he gets his well, you'll see he's going to place his well in just a second. He support autos his teammate, places his well, swaps to Prismatic and Sanguine. And you'll see here suddenly he's hitting 110 Ks, 115 Ks even, right? So pretty crazy damage. They've tested a lot of stuff on this boss, and Queenbreaker is by far the fastest. And like I mentioned, right, the reason why you don't have 2 Titans is because the Bolt Charge Flinch would be a little bit too unmanageable to handle. Yeah, pretty fast kill. The corrupted puppeteer just formed new puppets and has died. He's already dead, right? So pretty cool stuff here. You know, pretty fast run. Some time save to be had on entrance, right? Because Savage was a little bit slow on entrance, and you know, some time save to be had on Raneiks as well, especially with the new kind of like rocket strat where you just blow yourself up on top of the machine priest. So potentially, definitely some time save here. They could definitely get like 7. But regardless, you know, pretty fast stuff here. Vesper's Host, a lot of people are very turned off by this dungeon because when Bungie tends to patch a lot of speedrun tech or, you know, oobs and holes and stuff like that in the map, people get very discouraged from running stuff. But this team was willing to brave it out, and I'd say they've definitely shown to the community that Vesper's Host is one of, I would say, the better dungeons to speedrun, actually. The oob part at the start has some very unique movement tech, very unique routing. And I really like the strategy that they've designed and like the routing that they use to kind of get around some of the kind of roadblocks that Bungie has erected in place. And I would say the boss encounters are not particularly boring as well either. So yeah, pretty cool. Good mix of kind of just doing the mechanics fast as well as doing the mechanics with like really unique strats. So shout out to this team. I hope they get a 7 or at least a lower 8 sometime in the near future, maybe next season. And yeah, that's pretty much it for Vesper's Host. I hope you guys enjoyed. Next, we're going to be revisiting Sunder Doctrine, which has a significantly faster time now than when we last were talking about it. So I'm excited to present that to you guys when the time comes, which should probably be in a day or two. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you around.